Welcome, Healthcare Talk community, and the rest of you who are watching us live tonight. I'm Kathy Brown of Brown Nose Social Media, and I have a special guest tonight who's going to talk about examining smartphone dermatology with a special app that he is very well versed to talk about. I'd like to introduce you to Alexander Börve. Would you like to say hello, Alexander?
Yes, hello. Good evening.
Yeah, depending on what time of day it is, wherever the people are watching. Since this is international and it's played live and recorded also, we never know when people will be watching this. So I'd like to talk with you, Alexander. First, I'd like to give everybody an idea of your background and your qualifications for what we're about to talk about. So can you give us a background on what is your medical background? I know that you're a physician, and can you tell us a little bit about you?
So I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I was trained as a medical doctor in Sweden, in a place called Lund University, and then I did my specialty at Sahlgrenska University, where I practice as an orthopedic surgeon. And I did 2 to 3 years surgery after my residency. I'm going into spine surgery, and now I've been more gone into the digital health space, entrepreneurship, and I've been full-time on that. So I haven't done any real surgery for 2 years now, but yes, now I'm more into the space of technology.
Well, I know that some of my viewers are members of the Society for Physician Entrepreneurs, and they would probably like to know a little bit about how you decided to go into entrepreneurship. Why the technologies? What drew you to that direction?
Right. So I've always been a little bit of an entrepreneur. When I was younger, I was one of those. So, for example, at school, every time when you change class, when you're going to go to the older class, you could sell books secondhand. So I would always go a little bit early to the school, and I would buy all the books. And so when the other kids came, then I would put like on $1 extra on every book that you had to buy. I was actually penalized by the headmaster, and my mom had to pull my ear, but that was my first experience as an entrepreneur. And then in coming into healthcare, I mean, when I was in medical school, I was one of those nerds that bought this thing called a Palm Pilot. I don't know if you remember.
Yes,
the Palm Pilot was a little gadget that you could have games on it, or you can do BMI, you can do all these special things, and then you can also download all your medical books on it. So that's what I did, and then I ran around there being a bit of a nerd. And then the nerd took me to being practicing medicine, and I was a lot in the ER, and there I saw that the paramedics, when there was a car accident or something like that, they would bring in the patients in the ambulance, and also a Polaroid picture next to the ambulance that they would have taken of the car accident scene or other trauma scene. And I thought, well, why do they bring this Polaroid picture? And they could, since they all have cell phones, they didn't have smartphones at that time. It was like dumb phones. So, but still, I thought you can send pictures with your cell phone. So why don't you send these pictures to us while you are in the car, communicating with the ER, being on your way, and at least we have a picture in front of us. As we all know, a picture says 1,000 words. So, I saw this as something very convenient. However, my peers and trying to get something like this into healthcare at that time was not very easy. You had red tape. The first thing they asked, well, how do we know that this will actually help the patient? It could make the patient worse. We could make false decisions. Well, blah, blah, blah. They didn't even want to try it. And then I felt, as a young enthusiastic and lots of energy, I thought, look, this is going to take a long time and a lot of energy. So what I did, I flipped the service, and at that time I had a girlfriend who was a dermatologist. So I remember that she said that being to dinner parties and things like that, that when she introduced herself as a dermatologist, everyone would then sooner or later during the dinner party come up with, hey, can I ask you a question? Do you think I should go for the doctor for this? Is there something I could treat this for? Blah, blah, blah. So she would basically do these small consults. She didn't mind that much, but there was one night that there was someone that had a little bit too much to drink, and then he or I can't remember, it was a she, asked if she could come into the back room to have a look at something. Well, basically, this person pulled their pants down and asked, what is this? I've been walking around with this for a long time. And that's when she said, look, Alex, I think the best place to maybe use this kind of a system, or where you can have the system, was in a situation where I'm at the dinner party or something like that. I can tell these people to send in a picture with a with their telephone, their dumb phone. And that's how I then flipped the system into dermatology. And we went on from there. And I also had learned my lesson that if in the future I'm going to sell something or get healthcare to use my system, it has to be evidence-based medicine. So that's why I started a PhD then in telemedicine at my university, then in Sweden called Gothenburg University, where I started my first study where you can actually send in images from a family healthcare office to dermatologists using a smartphone. So that was my first article that I published.
So how many years have you not been in school?
So yes, it's a very good question, and if you ask any physician about that, we feel that we're in school all the time. I mean, this is what we have to do. I mean, I know in different countries they are also, I think every 5 or 10 years you have to do some sort of test just to see if you're up to the new methods, the new evidence-based medicine, if you're still eligible to practice medicine. So one thing that we learn at school as medical doctors is basically to keep learning the rest of your life.
Well, on that note, I'd like to bring in the other guest that I have that I think will add to this conversation, and that is Mark Brown, who has also gone to school for quite a while. I know because I'm married to him, and I've had to wait for him to finish to finally have time with him. So Mark Brown, he is a chief medical officer for a hospital system here in town, and I thought if we bring him into the conversation, then we can have some conversations that can really challenge you on some of the ways that your application might be used in a system versus one-on-one, because I know that's an area you want to be in. So Mark, would you like to say hello to the group?
Good evening. Hi, I'm Mark Brown. I'm not a practicing physician as well. My practice is administrative medicine. My training is both internal medicine and pediatrics, and so my practice was primary care. After leaving primary care, practiced about 4 years and have done administrative and executive medicine ever since, in roles of Vice President of Medical Affairs, Chief Medical Officers of primary care groups and hospitals, multi-specialty groups. I spent about 4.5 years doing healthcare consulting, and did healthcare consulting for physician integration strategies, quality. Got the chance to really learn a lot about healthcare reform, because as I was doing my consulting and really in the middle of my consulting career, Obamacare became a reality, and so spoke for a while nationally on healthcare reform. And then recently, about, I guess it's been 2 years ago now, I got off the road and took a full-time job as the Chief Medical Officer of a health system here in East Tennessee, Covenant Health. So thank you. It's good to be here, and it's good to meet you, Alexander. I'm curious to learn more about your application. I do a lot of work within my career and also just curiosity in the world of informatics and telehealth and population health, etc. So when Kathy was sharing with me your application, as we were actually out walking the dog last night, and I was curious, and so I sort of invited myself to listen and hear a little bit more about your application and ask some questions, maybe provide you some feedback, and maybe allow you to ask me some questions as well as a potential consumer and user of your application.
So, Alexander, I would like to start by giving the viewers an idea of what the application is. Do you happen to have a phone and an example that you can show people, the pro version for physicians, primary care physicians?
Yeah, I can do that. I can briefly just explain. So the company that I have is IDoc24, so it's a digital health company, and we want to do a lot of, well, what we want to do is do specialist care through any mobile device. It's difficult to do all healthcare at once. It's huge. So one vertical that we're focusing on now, which we find, well, which we feel is the lowest hanging fruit, is obviously dermatology, because everyone has one of these mobile phones, and a camera there is very, very good, or it's sufficient to photograph something and then send that photograph to someone else to talk about that photograph. So the app that we've launched now is called First Derm. That's for the consumer. So anyone can download the app from either Android or for iOS, and you just download the app for free. There's no registration. There are no accounts. You just open up the app, and then you start snapping, taking pictures of your skin, and you send them to our dermatologists. And then within 24 hours, you will have an answer from one of our dermatologists of what it could be, how you could treat it, or if you should go to the doctor. We also position the service that you, as the consumer, you are anonymous. So we don't know who's sending it. So we're not collecting any email addresses, any phone numbers, any iPhone number or anything like that. It's meant to be that you feel that you're doing a Google search, because about 80 to 90% of people today who have symptoms, they do a Google search before they go to the doctor. And they do this because they feel quite confident that they can experiment, or they can put in keywords, or they can look what they have. Unfortunately, though, many people come to WebMD or other internet health portals that at the end of the day you either end up with some kind of cancer or AIDS, reading these different symptoms or diagnostics. So what we try to do as a service is between doing a Google search, we're completely anonymous, and going to the medical doctor. So we kind of a Q&A, anonymous Q&A with a person who in this app is then a dermatologist. So it's kind of store and forward, and there's a dermatologist in the other end. When they have the time, they will answer your picture, and they don't know who you are. The only thing that you send in as text is if you're male, female, how old you are. You are allowed to say where you're from if you want to. It's not obligatory, and then the text accompanying that image. And that's what we've seen from the studies, that there's a very good correlation between seeing the person live and also doing it from the image. In the cases when the dermatologist cannot say what it is, in real life, a lot of times the dermatologist wouldn't be able to say what it was anyway, and they would do a biopsy. So in those cases, we say, look, we can't say much. It could be this, this, this. However, we would recommend you to go and see a doctor live, and they will take further tests and diagnoses to look at it. So that's the consumer app, yeah.
Now, Alexander, I want to ask you something about this anonymous communication, because I understand you don't track the phone, you don't track an email, you don't track an IP address, but somehow that answer has to get from the doctor to the person who's requested that answer. How does that answer come? In what delivery system?
Yes, so that's a very good question. So, for example, in the app, when you send in a case, so for example, if you have a look here, I don't know if you can see that, but you can't see it very clearly. However, what you receive as a receipt when you send in to us, you get an 8 number. A randomized 8 number is like when you buy an airplane ticket, you get a booking number. So in order for you to find your airplane ticket, you put in that booking number, and then the server will match your booking number to your request. And that's the same thing that happens to us. You get an 8-digit number, which is it's unique for your case. And when you then enter the app again, it will do an ask to our server to find that number. And then when they find that number, then they will reveal the case. They will reveal the images you sent in, and also the text that you sent in. And then in the event, if the dermatologist has answered, then also the answer that the dermatologist has done. So if you lose this case number, unfortunately, we will not be able to help you.
Now, I know with some other mobile apps that part of the reason that there isn't a tracking of patients is to intentionally not create patient records, because patient records imply a physician-patient relationship. So in this case, there is no patient or physician-physician relationship because there is no medical record to go back to, right?
So it's quite funny you bring this up. So I've looked into this, and the definition of a diagnosis, if you look in by law, to set a diagnosis on someone, there has to be a patient-doctor relationship. And in order to have a doctor-patient relationship, the patient has to know the name of the doctor, and the doctor has to know the name of the patient. So if either are anonymous, then we are basically not setting a diagnosis 100% by definition. And it's more of a Q&A, anonymous Q&A, which, coming back to this Google search, it does actually have a great benefit for the user, for the ones that have some kind of medical issue, actually to be anonymous and search that information.
So now let's differentiate the Pro version from the public version.
Right. So then we have a version which is called IDoc24 Pro, where we have family doctors that request to register to the app. So that app is locked. Nobody can access that unless people have signed up for it and also given passwords by us. So family doctors or pediatricians or non-expert in dermatology can ask for a registration and then sign up for it. They will open up the app. The app is very similar to First Durham, which is the consumer version, but here there are more questions that a dermatologist would like to have answered, that the family doctor or the GP has to answer. And also in this service, you don't give up the name of the patient. So if you have a patient that comes into your doctor's office, you would just pull out this app, sign in, take pictures of the issue, describe it, and then send it in to a dermatologist. And the family doctor will have the name of the dermatologist. So here, the professionals will actually have a connection. They would know who each other are. But still, the dermatologist does not know the name of the patient who the family doctor or pediatrician is asking something. So it's very good for this second opinion service. And this is what we do anyway, everyday physicians. If we have an issue, usually we would pick up the phone and we would call one of our specialties, for example, in the ER, if there's someone that comes in. I mean, if I'm a family doctor and someone comes in with a bad knee or a bad leg, we're not sure if we should send them into the ER. We usually pick up the phone and we talk to someone on call who's a specialist and say, look, I describe the symptoms. I don't even have to give up the name or anything of that person. We just have a chat. What do you think I should do next? It's like a Q&A, second opinion. And that's exactly what our service is, that instead of giving a call, like talking, you just take a picture of the issue and then put some text, and the dermatologist, who's already trained today to look at visual images, can quickly give you an idea of what to do next.
Before we go into the study now, Mark, do you have any questions that you want to ask before we talk about the study that he has done?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, Alexander. For your First Derm app, is that a free app?
It's free to download. There's no registration, as I said. It's quite funny. It looks very much like Snapchat. So when we pitch it to people, we say, look, First Derm is Snapchat for dermatology. Instead of sending the snap to your friends, you will actually send the snap to our dermatologist and have an answer back. However, every time you send in to us, it does cost $40 to send in.
Okay. And do your dermatologists ever recommend treatment? If it's a routine pediatric rash, if it's Candida, if it's whatever?
So they recommend a treatment like, for example, well, this looks like eczema or dermatitis. At the pharmacy, you can buy hydrocortisone, which is a percentage in strength, which you can get over the counter. If it doesn't get better with that hydrocortisone within a couple of days or a week, or if it gets worse, then you should go and see your family doctor. So we always, if they give a treatment advice or information, they would always end up saying if it gets worse or it does not get better within a week, then you should go and see your doctor in person. And if you look at this, it's a little bit what the physician today is already saying. So if you go to a physician today and you get a script of antibiotics or some kind of medicine, they will always say, look, if you don't get better on this medicine within a week, come back and see me, and then we'll have a look at it again.
So I understand your first Derm app as a bit of a glorified Google search, for lack of a better term, and I kind of like that description of it. Although the treatment part of it feels kind of close to me to a patient-physician relationship, but I get it. It's no different than you get to WebMD and it says here are the following treatments for anything from a rash to a migraine. You can find that information. So if it's given as general information for that particular rash and not information specific to that patient, you're not taking a history, you're not asking for allergies, you're not doing any of that stuff, right?
Right. And one thing which is funny is that if you speak to dermatologists that have people waiting in line to come and see them, about 40 to 50% of the patients that actually come and see a dermatologist, they're not actually coming to the dermatologist for the issue they were complaining about in the first time, because the body has resolved that issue automatically. But they say, I finally have this time with the dermatologist, let's ask about something else that I'm worrying about.
Right. And second,
so in a lot of the cases when we actually say get something over the counter, it would have disappeared within a week anyway.
Right. I was going to bring up the 7 rules of dermatology that I remembered from medical school, but I'll leave that for not a live hangout. The same question on the IDoc24 app. I was actually looking at it while you were talking. How do you monetize that?
So the IDoc24 Pro, that's a subscription model to the doctor's practices. And it's at $150 a month. And with that, you also get something called a dermoscope. A dermoscope is a magnifying glass with a Polaroid lamp in it. And this is what dermatologists use today to look at suspected skin cancer lesions. Sure. So, for example, if you look at rashes or something like that, or spots, you would not need the dermoscope. However, if there's a suspected skin cancer lesion, you can use this dermoscope to magnify it. So the IDoc24 model is a subscription model where you would get this dermoscope and then also access to the app and then also access to our dermatologist. The question, of course, which is in the US, very much so in the US, because there the system is that doctors want to make money. You make money having patients coming in. Right. So finding the perfect business model where the doctors want to pay for a service like this, that's what we're kind of working on right now. However, if you look at from a Kaiser Permanente perspective, where there's a closed healthcare system where doctors are getting salaries, here is something where the administrators or there's a higher body that can be paying the subscription for the doctors, and then they can use this to make their service that they provide for their patients more efficient.
Well, and you mentioned Kaiser. I want to come back to the business model because I've got a couple of thoughts that I'd like to share with you where I think it could be somewhat effective, but from a business model perspective, and clinically I think it's pretty cool. One question I would have here in the U.S. is liability, particularly for, let's use melanoma as a great example. Typically as a primary care doc, if I had a suspicion of a melanoma, and I could do that without consulting a dermatologist, then I would send that off to a dermatologist because I don't want to miss that. I want someone doing a biopsy, doing the Mohs procedure, whatever it is, and taking care of that in relatively short order. If your dermatologist hasn't established a doctor-patient relationship, I'm now assuming the liability for that potential carcinoma, for that melanoma. And I don't see how that's necessarily going to change my therapy by getting your dermatologist to chime in on that diagnosis. If I have a question, I'm not sure, I'm sending it. It's out the door. I want to have high sensitivity, low specificity. If I have ready access to a dermatologist anyway, and one that I know, one that I trust, one that I see in the doctor's lounge, whatever. And I have that relationship, and I think, as you know, a lot of referrals are relational. It's not just that you're an orthopedist. I said you're a good orthopedist and I trust you. You're taking care of my patients, etc. So I can see some challenges with it in the traditional fee-for-service model. Liability would be one, but again, you're right, spot on with if I'm getting paid fee-for-service, if I'm getting paid, if I'm netting, if I'm lucky, $50 a visit. Not charging, but netting $50 a visit. Where's,
right.
What's the value proposition for me?
Right. So the liability issue. So which service do you want to hear the liability? Is it the consumer one or is it the practicing physicians?
The practicing physician's liability. I'm not as worried about the consumer liability. I think you've got that okay with you're not establishing a patient-physician relationship. It's on the edge a little bit, but it's not. It wouldn't be tough to get an attorney to sign off on that. It's my personal liability. I'm accepting. You're basically enhancing my diagnosis. You may be making it more likely that I'm able to diagnose, but again, I'm not the value prop to me. Again, the only reason I'm going to look at it is if I don't know what I'm looking at, I want a dermatologist to take a look at it. But normally, if I want a dermatologist to take a look at it, I'm worried about you need a biopsy, you need some retin-A, you need something I'm not familiar prescribing that I'm not going to, something that poisons you or makes you glow. I'm going to send that off anyway. And so you're not going to treat it. Your docs aren't going to diagnose it.
Yeah. So I can tell you, I mean, with the physician to physician, where the family doctor sends in an image to a dermatologist, I mean, that's where I conducted 2 studies. First, one study, this was on skin cancer. This is only on skin cancer lesions. We're not talking about rashes now.
Right.
So on this. So we did one study where we looked at the specificity and sensitivity of this dermoscope that we were using, which was an attachment on the iPhone, and using our app. And we found out that the results were very comparable with when the dermatologist actually saw the patient face to face. So that was the first study we did, just to see that this dermoscope actually is effective, right? And then the second study we did using this attachment, dermoscope, and the app, family doctors would send their patients where they wanted a second opinion about something to the dermatologist. So there we had 1,500 patients in that study. It's the largest study of its kind in telemedicine or teledermoscopy, where you had that many patients. And for every patient where the family doctor wanted a second opinion from a dermatologist, they used our app, they used this dermoscope, and sent it into the dermatologist. All patients would also go into the dermatologist just in case, because this was a study. Right. So in those results, we found that in 40% of the cases where the dermatologist said this is benign, you don't need any further treatment, actually the patient was benign, it was a benign lesion. In those cases where they said, well, here is a suspicious malignant melanoma, in about 50% of the cases, it was actually a malignant melanoma, and they also did take a biopsy of all these cases. And that's a very high sensitivity, specificity, if you look at how teledermatology is with skin cancer and so forth. Then there are other skin cancers such as actinic keratosis, which is precursor to skin cancer, or basal cell carcinoma, which is a form of skin cancer. It's not dangerous, but it's something they have to treat. And they were spot on in a lot of these cases. And what we found out was that they reduced the time of diagnosing and treatment of malignant melanoma from 35 days down to 9 days, and 80% of the patients, they had some kind of treatment on the first visit. And we looked also into how many skin cancers did we miss. We did not miss any malignant melanomas in this study. However, we did miss some precursors, actinic keratosis, and then we also missed a basal cell cancer. And as we know, this is nothing that will kill you, and it's something that will grow and change, and then obviously you would come back to the doctor for a look at it again to see if there had to be treatment. So The liability, I mean, our doctors, what I want to say is that they are very careful. There's an expression when you're a dermatologist which says, if in doubt, cut it out. So here as well is, if they were in a doubt of any of these images, they would say, look, I want to see this person, this patient in person, and in many cases they did do a biopsy or they did an excision. And we can see in our study as well, 50% of the melanomas that they thought was a melanoma were actually benign. So they were not malignant, but they were in doubt, and they took and did an excision biopsy just to see if it's dangerous or not. So back again, we have spoken to insurance companies about this, and they, you know, in all cases, the dermatologist is always liability or liable for what he says. So they're very careful with what they say.
Right.
They don't do any risks. And then our family doctors, they are also aware that the information that they're given by the dermatologist, for example, doing telemedicine, you're not covering the whole body. You're only looking at one specific lesion. And from studies, it shows that about 15% of the cancerous lesions is not actually the lesion that you're asking about, but there's another lesion that the dermatologist finds on the body in another space. So
Right.
that's important information that you give to the family doctor, that we're just looking at the lesion that you're asking about, but you should do a whole body examination to find other suspected lesions. And then it's also important to inform the patient that, look, at this moment, it doesn't look like it's skin cancer. However, if it grows, changes color, any of these A, B, C, D, E's, which are for malignant melanoma, if any of these changes, then you should come in for a second visit.
Right. So a couple of thoughts, and I appreciate you outlining that because it gives me some clarity. I think your suspicion is accurate. No matter how good this is, it's going to be tough in a fee-for-service model, because it's hard for me to delineate the value that's greater than sending to a dermatologist. Because in a fee-for-service model, if I'm only at risk for me financially, there's no downside to me sending to a dermatologist. And just as you said, there's an upside. When in doubt, cut it out. I've got a referral. My buddy works down the street. However, if I'm in an at-risk model, if I'm in an ACO, if I'm in Kaiser as a similar risk-based model, if one of the things that I'm looking at is not only quality outcome but value-based outcomes, now you're looking at something that might have some value, because it's almost as if it were a virtual nurse practitioner, if you will. So it's someone making even though a dermatologist may be more highly trained, he or she is seeing less of the body than I am. So it's someone doing a limited physical exam with limited knowledge, not because of their knowledge, but because of the knowledge we've chosen to share with them. So it is an additional piece of information that I could choose whether or not I'm going to spend or recommend spending a portion of that patient's healthcare dollar. Now it has potentially some value, because you're allowing me to have a equivalent, and I say equivalent, maybe, but an adequate to accurate, somewhere to equivalent, somewhere on that scope, that spectrum, opportunity to make a diagnosis, and then I can make a choice. I can assess that risk. So in a risk-based model, it could be interesting. It could be an interesting tool to allow me to make the best choice, or make a choice with the patient. Here's what I know. We can assess the risk together. Are you going to assume part of that healthcare dollar? A couple of other thoughts along that line, if I may be so bold as to give you business advice. The direct-to-consumer market here in the the direct-to-employer market here in the U.S. Looking at occupational health. If I own Walmart, and one of my big costs is, if I work in Florida and I own Walmarts or McDonald's or amusement parks where people have a lot of skin exposure, and I've got a big exposure from the financial liability of skin cancer, would I pay $150 a month to use this to remotely screen all of my employees all day long? All day long. That doesn't really involve a physician on my end. Now, maybe you'd have to have maybe an employee health physician or something, so you wouldn't be liable for the patient-physician relationship. But some sort of remote group preventative activity could be interesting. Part of a sports physical. You know, I used to do a lot of sports physicals when I was in practice. You know, line up 100 football players, and you have one guy's at the heart station, one guy's doing blood pressure, one guy's checking joints, one's checking muscles. You run them through. You know, you do other agility, and I never say we cleared anybody. We assessed your risk of your ability to participate in sports. You know, if you had a skin cancer screening part of that, again with that tool, it could be a preventative tool.
Yeah, I see where you're getting at, and you can screen big populations or things like that. Sure. One thing which is funny though is that still there are skin cancers being missed by doctors, and usually the doctors who miss the skin cancer is a family physician who would have, they didn't have access to a dermatologist, right?
Right.
So in those cases, that's where our service is very good. And then looking at something where you can save money, I mean, if we, all skin cancer is treatable. You just have to find it early enough. So nobody should be dying from skin cancer ever, really, because it can all be found at an early stage. So here where you take the dermoscope and send that off to a dermatologist just to be safe or hear his opinion, and if you can save someone's life, that's a huge cost saving for both any healthcare system or insurance company, and also it's very convenient for the patient. I mean, it's very nice that you saved someone's life, and also for the, at the end of the day, we are doctors, and we don't only think about money all day in, all day out. We actually have this little bit of hero kind of feeling in yourself that you actually want to do good for your patient. And that's something which is very interesting from that study, which we did, where there's 1,500 patients included in that. We managed to get all these good things, all these when you do a medical study, they're always, you think what the result is going to be, but all of a sudden you find these byproducts of your study, which are of great benefit. And that's what we see.
Let me ask another question. Have you thought of this or considered it for use in places where there is not access to dermatology? Remote access regions. And where my mind goes in the U.S. are two things. Number one would be like the VA health system, where they have this very integrated network for veterans, and they have a single electronic health record all across the country. It's already very electronic, but they have a lot of access issues. There are not enough hospitals, there are not enough docs. There's some issues occasionally with the quality of physicians. So the ability of, they have a lot of primary care clinics, a lot of physician extenders that staff some of the primary care visits. So something like that would seem to me to lend itself very much to remote access to a dermatologist, even though you wouldn't have that patient-physician relationship. The other thing, sort of a corollary type of scenario, would be the Indian Health Service, most of which is, and that's not politically incorrect, that's what they call it. It's not the Native American Healthcare Service. It is the Indian Health Service. That's the official government name. But not only on reservations where there's large populations with significant morbidity, significant disease states, but one of the big regions is Alaska for the Indian Health Service, where in Alaska you can't get there from here. Everything is remote. And they're doing a lot of stuff in the Indian Health Service with telemedicine right now. And access to remote areas and sort of paradoxically, Alaska, there is a fair amount of sunshine. When the sun's out, it's really out, right? It's reflecting off the snow. You're getting a lot of UV rays. When it's dark for a long time. But when it's out for a long time. So that may be a really intriguing population to consider, at least for a study, or to use it as an access tool. Again, great clinical benefit, potentially great financial benefit.
Yeah. So basically now I was at the last, just to one point where you said you should do a study. I just want to iterate that. I was at the Denver Dermatology Congress now in March, and I was at their telemedicine talk. And basically, everybody knows that telemedicine in dermatology works.
Right.
It works. There's no point doing more studies anymore. We've done enough pilots. We've done enough. Now it should really be used in the healthcare system, especially now after this huge study that we did on 1,500 patients, where we actually can see that we're saving people's lives and doing really fast healthcare. So we shouldn't be doing any more studies now. Now is the ones that we should be contacting are people like you, Mark, chief medical officers that say, look, this is the stuff we need in healthcare now, and we want to buy it in, and we know it works, and okay, we might not figure out the monetary model right now, but it's to benefit for our patients, to our family doctors, and to our dermatologists. So, why don't we start using that now and then figure out who's going to pay for it down the line?
Do you have local relationships at all with the local dermatologists to say, we have a preferred dermatology panel we refer to, or do you live up entirely to the primary care doc? If I'm the primary care doc, I just refer to whoever I want to refer to.
That's up to the primary care doc to choose. If they refer to a dermatologist in our network, they would have to pay $40 for that consult.
Okay,
if they
consultation.
Yeah, or 20 or $40, depending on the subscription model you have. For example, there's a subscription model. If you pay $150 a month for a service, you can have 2 cases looked at for free, for example, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, but if you are in your own network, let's say it's Kaiser Permanente or a closed healthcare system, you already have a family doctor that's on a salary and a dermatologist is on salary, then you would be using your own dermatologist in that system. You're just making the system more efficient. There would not, that's really the best kind of a service for this, that you will just license it and you will use it however you want.
There's a related question here that I want to just throw in here because I think it's kind of related. John Durant was asking if you can send the picture to 2 different dermatologists. I think what he's asking is, can you get a second opinion from this system if there isn't a local dermatologist to give a second opinion?
Yeah, I mean, we do have that capability on. You can send in to dermatologists, and you'll have 2 answers. That's great. Dermatology is difficult. We know that in a hospital setting or in a dermatologist setting, a lot of dermatologists, they ask their colleagues for a second opinion. They say, hey, come in here, have a look at this patient. What do you think? Do you think this is really this, or this? And, confer. I mean, this is medicine. That's how we practice medicine. We always ask our colleagues if we're not sure. So obviously you can send in 2 cases, send the same case to 2 different dermatologists, or what some of our dermatologists are already doing today. If they're not sure what it is, they will actually ask another dermatologist in our group for a second opinion.
Alexander, I think I just figured out how I'd pay for this as I was listening to you. I'm going to have to charge you for it, though. I used to be a consultant. Just kidding.
I didn't hear that last part. You said something.
I said I may have to charge. I said I may have to charge you for my advice. That's right. It's breaking up in different countries.
There's a bad network. Every time you say charge me for your advice, I can't hear that.
I hope your network's built on a different platform. I think the way that if I were going to explore this, here's what I would do. I would call my friends down at Humana or down at Blue Cross. They are continually contacting us to say, we would like to partner with you by, sharing the cost of a case manager, as for instance, ultimately decreasing the cost, the per member per month cost, because that's what they're trying to sell to the people who are buying their insurance, right? Is a decreased cost, a lower premium, a better outcome, better product, etc. And I would think that the private payers at that cost, a subscription cost of $150 a month per doc, it's a pretty nominal cost. It's a lot cheaper than a case manager. It's a lot cheaper than a case manager. And if you could demonstrate a true, you've obviously demonstrated the clinical piece, but if you could demonstrate a true decrease in insurance language, a decrease in the per member per month cost relative to skin disease. So if I use your app and I'm Blue Cross, it costs me $1 per member per month. If I don't use your app, it costs me $2.50 per member per month on average of my $150 per member per month cost for a certain population. That would be an easy sell. And that's where the experiment lies. That's where the study lies, not in the clinical value, but in being able to demonstrate its financial value on a per member per month cost. Now it's not my risk. I've got the clinical risk covered. I'm getting good information. Blue Cross Blue Shield is happy. The patient is happy. They've got a $2,000 out-of-pocket deductible because they're on an HSA. So now they don't have to pay to go see the dermatologist, right? We're all comfortable with our diagnosis. Everybody's cost goes down. Patient outcome is equally as good, if not better. Everybody wins. So that, if you can plug, that's a good place, I think, to plug into the cost curve. That might really work, actually.
And it's an interesting comment. That this is actually why I originally came to the the USA. My university, they have an exchange program with UC Berkeley. So
Okay.
right now I am at the School of Public Health, where I'm writing a cost minimization paper on that big study of 1,500 patients that we have. We've done this decision tree. We've done everything. All the data is there. We just have to write the paper. So when we've done that, then we can do exactly what you're saying. We can prove how much our system would cost per patient and how much our system would cost how much it would cost not using our system.
It's a good learning lab. There's positives and negatives. I mean, UC Berkeley is a great school, and Kaiser Permanente is a very unique model, but they've never been able to replicate truly Kaiser Permanente outside of Kaiser Permanente, except maybe Geisinger, but it has very similar characteristics in that it's Geisinger even more so is geographically locked in. It's kind of up on a hill, and it's geographically does what Kaiser Permanente has done with scale. So it's a great learning lab. The challenge will be, can you do it outside of a Kaiser Permanente? And I think you could in something like I just talked about. It actually sort of paradoxically would work on a smaller scale better than a larger scale first. Kaiser Permanente relies a lot on its scale, its scope, to share risk. It's actuarial. But you could do this on a smaller scale in I'll use a generality, but not an NCQA certified, but a medical home model. I have a primary care. I used to practice with 3 people, 3 med peds, 3 other meds peds docs. There were 4 of us. We would potentially have Humana buy us one of those apps, and a lot of the private payers now are doing sort of risk-based fee-for-service, if you will. They're hybrid models. So there's money for quality, more or less, very loosely, and quality we could debate, right? But there's money for risk, there's money for value, there's money for quality that could be tied to technology of something like this. Because it's a really interesting access point. You get similar information. My dermatologist friends aren't going to be very happy about this, by the way, because
Why not?
I'm replacing them with an app and a dermatologist far away. And so
you can use them though.
Huh?
You can use your friend dermatologists who are close to you, because what you would actually be doing, you're bringing them high-value patients. So you would bring them the skin cancer patients where they can make $1,000 instead of bringing them a benign lesion where they don't make any money.
As long as the plane is full. That's the Delta analogy, right? As long as the plane is full, you make your profit on the last seat on the plane because you've already covered your fixed cost.
Well, the average wait time for a dermatologist appointment is 4 weeks in the US, so they already have the plane full.
Assuming that's the case, you're correct. But just one of the challenges and barriers is always going to be, I really don't like being that full, but I really like being that full. From a financial perspective, of a fee for service. If we're in an at-risk network, if we're in an ACO together or something, that's different. But it's unusual to have a multi-specialty network that shares risk. Advocate would be, up in Chicago, would be probably the biggest example of that. There's 5,800 docs or something like that. Now I forget the final number. Big PHO. It's actually a PHO of PHOs. But they might be a little different model in a shared risk. I think you're right. I think there's enough of volume to go around that most dermatologists now for the bread and butter diagnosis are using an extender anyway. When I go see my dermatologist, I've actually never seen my actual dermatologist ever. I've been to the office, I can't tell you how many times, but routine skin screenings, I'm a fair skinned guy, etc. I know Clark, his PA, extraordinarily well. Probably breaking HIPAA now talking about this. But I've never physically seen the dermatologist because I've never had to have anything cut off or removed.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting.
So your point, you know, you're sort of, as I said, you're sort of becoming the virtual extender.
Yeah.
The first line of diagnosis, which could be an interesting marketing tool to an actual dermatologist. That would be an interesting slant. I hadn't thought of that. Is it cheaper for me to hire you as a primary care screening tool and have anybody who can hold a phone do it?
Yeah.
Than it is for me to pay $100,000 to a PA or more?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I can tell you from the consumer model, the first derm model that we have, 30% of our users, we actually tell them to go to the dermatologist. So we're actually increasing patients coming into the dermatologist visit.
Yeah, that's true. I actually saw that. I was reading while you were talking to me. I was reading your website. But.
Well, I think that you've done a good job of solving most of the problems of the world tonight, guys.
Well, you heard that, Kathy. I mean, the issue where we've been talking about a lot is this thing with business models, right? Who's going to pay for it? You know, that's the sticking point. You know, I have great technology. I proved with the technology, big studies, that, you know, we're saving people's lives. The patient is happy. The family doctor is happy. The dermatologist is happy. Everyone's happy. But the system is not on a wide scale. And I think this is the issue with telemedicine on a whole is this, who's going to pay for it? That's why it's important for me that we do have a consumer-facing app where the consumer chooses. Nobody else is choosing for the consumer, but the consumer chooses what to do with their money. That one is the one that's being right now the most successful. It's the easiest one to scale up, and that's where we see the most users today. And we've had over 8,000 people who sent in images to us, and everybody have a service where people complain, but we're still in the single digit of complaints, and all our complaints, our support handles that very quickly within hours, and our patients or our users have been very happy. The people that want to have their money back or complain, we give them the money back. There's no point getting angry at them. They're always consumers out there who are never happy with whatever service or product that you use. So, but the ones that are happy, you could go on our App Store or our Android store to read the comments of the users who used our app. I mean, that in itself is very fulfilling for me and also my team who are behind us, that we're doing something great in medicine at the moment.
Wonderful. Well, Alexander, I hope that as your app continues to spread and more people are using it and you find some successful ways to have a business model that can be adapted into the physician space, I hope you'll come back and give us an update of where you are and where you're taking it, because I think that this will be not only exciting to see telemedicine starting to take off and all of the new tools we have, but from an entrepreneurial standpoint, there are a lot of physicians who have taken the route like you, and they learn from people like you to get those follow-up stories, to find out the lessons you've learned and the successes you've had. So I hope that you will come back. And I want to thank you for being a guest tonight and sharing your app and the information about your study. And Mark, I'd like to thank you for bringing your expertise and your advice on getting this into the market and getting a handle on what might be some other possibilities. And it is time. Go ahead.
Is that my pleasure? Thank you.
And it is time to wrap it up. We are heading to the top of the hour now, and I'm sure a lot of people are ready to have their glass of wine that I've been slowly sipping in when I'm not on camera. So thank you both, and thank you viewers for all of your comments and for watching tonight. And this is Kathy Brown of Brown News Social Media signing off.
Thank you.